Okay, we're at a minute after. I think we'll go ahead and get started while everyone joins here. So welcome to the National Trust Preservation Leadership Forum webinar series. For today, we've got a great US and international audience signed up for this webinar. So a special welcome to those of you who are joining from other time zones around the globe. And if you haven't already, yes, please tell us in the chat where you're calling in from. It's going to be great to see. I am Jim Lindberg. I'm Senior Policy Director at the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Just a reminder that Preservation Leadership Forum is the professional membership program of the National Trust, and forum webinars are supported by members of PLF. And so we really thank our forum members who are on the call with us today. Today's webinar is the second in our summer series on the Heritage Now campaign. And the National Trust is pleased to be a partner in this global campaign, which seeks to minimize greenhouse gas emissions from the built environment through reuse, retrofit, and using traditional low carbon building practices. Let's go to the next slide. So our topic today is heritage-informed decarbonization around the globe. Our agenda includes presentations and discussions with partners whose work is featured in the new Decarbonizing the Built Environment through Heritage Toolkit, which you'll hear more about, and is a fantastic new compendium of policies, principles, and case studies from around the globe. Well, we'll put a link in the chat to how to access the toolkit. Before we get started, just a couple of technical logistics. We'll take questions from the audience during the webinar. Please use the Q&A function that is at the bottom of your screen, or if you don't see it, click on the More button and it should pop up there. You're welcome to submit at any point during the webinar, but we'll wait until the end to answer live. And speakers may try to also respond by text or by typing answers if they have time during the webinar as well. And then also you're certainly encouraged to communicate to all participants using the chat function, but the Q&A is a way to get directly to the speakers. The closed captioning function is enabled for this webinar, and you can enable it or disable it with the controls at the bottom, again, with your audio settings. And then following the program, we will send out a recording of today's webinar directly to the email that you used to register. And of course, all of our forum webinars are available on our National Trust YouTube channel. And then finally, just as a reminder, everyone is asked to be respectful of each other in the chat and follow our code of conduct, which again, we'll put in the chat as well. All right, with that, let's get started. I'm going to turn it over to Billie Faircloth with the Built Buildings Lab. Billie is an architect, researcher, and educator. She's a professor at the Department of Architecture at Cornell and a co-author of the toolkit. So, Billie, all yours.
Thanks, Jim. Hello, everyone. We're here today to talk about heritage-informed decarbonization around the globe. And as you learned from Jim, this work that we're going to see today is part of a much larger effort called Decarbonizing the Built Environment through Heritage. So I'm going to tell you first a little bit about this project. It began in fall 2024 as one of 5 initiatives supported through the Imagining Futures program, which is part of the Climate Heritage Network. The project is funded by the Mellon Foundation and the 1772 Foundation. Thank you for your generous support. And it's led by Built Buildings Lab. So I'm part of the Built Buildings Lab team. But we're also joined in this effort by Architecture 2030, the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and the University of Lagos Architecture and Urbanism Research Hub. This project represents the collective wisdom and deep engagement of the Climate Heritage Network's Built Environment Forum, and these are members who are dedicated to activating cultural heritage and climate solutions across built places. So I encourage you to visit the climateheritage.org to learn more about the Climate Heritage Network and the network of government agencies, NGOs, universities, businesses, and other organizations working to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement through culture and heritage. Get to the next slide here. So as Jim mentioned, this is part of a webinar series in mid-June we heard more about the overarching campaign surrounding this project we call Heritage Now. We reviewed the campaign and we launched the toolkit. And today's focus is on cases and examples of heritage-informed decarbonization around the globe. So we have speakers today who are going to share a series of case studies, and we'll also have a discussion about perspectives on heritage-informed decarbonization. And then finally, our final webinar is taking place on August 18th. That's focused primarily on practical strategies for policy implementation and advocacy. So as background on this project, let's see, there we go, hold on, there we go. Okay. As background on this project, we frame the overall effort, decarbonizing the built environment through heritage, through a primary goal, which aims to integrate transformative cultural heritage-based solutions into climate policy at local and global levels. This project represents that heritage and heritage-based technologies can accelerate holistic climate action, that they offer decarbonization potential, and they hold lessons about how people have built and lived in ways that respond to local ecology and climate. The project began with three primary goals: to prepare cultural heritage advocates to transform building decarbonization knowledge and policy, to elevate heritage-based knowledge within climate policy, as well as elevating replicable solutions held within frontline communities, and to empower communities to integrate heritage-based decarbonization within climate policy and conversation. Part of the work that we've accomplished as a much larger network and team is to define heritage-informed decarbonization. And you can see the definition here as a strategy that applies wisdom practices in built places of the past to minimize greenhouse gas emissions from the built environment in the present and the future. So cultural heritage worldwide, designated and undesignated, tangible and intangible, demonstrates low carbon solutions for building design, construction, maintenance, and habitation and stewardship. This is at the center of the project. And heritage-informed decarbonization, you can see the list of strategies here on the screen. These are rooted in community and are responsive to local cultural and environmental contexts. And we believe these advance greenhouse gas reductions while preserving heritage. So you can see this list as including things such as repairable low carbon materials, material salvage and reuse, building repair and conservation, building adaptation and reuse, heating and cooling ventilation strategies, passive design features, occupant behavior, urban planning practices, cultural practices and relationships, and the reclaiming and restoration of knowledge. Heritage-informed decarbonization, which you'll hear about today in the cases that are represented by our panelists, our heritage-informed decarbonization represents strategies for new and existing buildings. And these align with practical and policy solutions that are reducing embodied carbon and whole life carbon emissions. So there are a whole range of other efforts that we know are underway in the form of decarbonization, embodied and whole life carbon, energy efficiency, renewable energy infrastructure, prioritizing circularity in the built environment. Heritage-informed decarbonization aligns with all of these efforts and creates an incredible synergy with these efforts that are underway. So we've been working for 2 years on this project. We began by engaging a range of communities, heritage practitioners, researchers, agencies, educators to gather replicable solutions. That's the whole key. Can we see what is happening on the ground? To date, as we begin to transition into a future phase of the project, which we will discuss at our last webinar, we have created 2 primary resources. First, the Heritage Now campaign, which Jim mentioned, is a campaign that you can sign up and support the 5 recommendations for heritage-informed decarbonization. But as Jim also mentioned, we've created the Decarbonizing the Built Environment through Heritage Toolkit. And this toolkit is aiming to support policymakers, practitioners, advocates, and community leaders who are interested in understanding the principles of heritage-informed decarbonization. So as you look at these 2 outcomes We can then begin to see how they work synergistically together. And with these outcomes, today we're focused primarily on the complete toolkit, as well as one of the sections in the complete toolkit. So inside the complete toolkit, which I believe today is available via download, inside the complete toolkit, we have three primary sections. Section 1, Introducing Heritage-Informed Decarbonization, provides terminology, policy approaches, policy participants, and co-benefits analysis of heritage-informed decarbonization. In Section 2, we talk more about the 5 principles of heritage-informed decarbonization. We define each of those principles, as well as the policy mechanisms and the strategic policy levers, and provide so many case studies about those that integrate those policies. In Section 3, we talk about cases of heritage-informed decarbonization. Again, that's our focus today. And this includes 14 global case studies that demonstrate the principles of heritage-informed decarbonization, as well as the co-benefits. So here are the 14 case studies that demonstrate heritage-informed decarbonization. These case studies, again, are indexed against 12 approaches, but those heritage-informed decarbonization principles are 5, and they include learning from the past, reuse first, engage place, revalue building waste, and make policy inclusive. These 5 principles are explained in detail within the toolkit, and they are indexed against 12 approaches. But they also demonstrate a typological range that includes buildings and practices and programs and initiatives and policies. The case studies in Section 3, which again is our focus today, provide a project overview, provide a heritage-informed decarbonization narrative. They go into the co-benefits and the outcomes, and they also discuss the cultural context, the hurdlers, and the enablers. We also have included in the toolkit an explanation of how we selected these cases, recognizing that the overarching effort from 2024 onward actually identified over 100 cases. These 14 that are represented in the toolkit align with the heritage-informed decarbonization definition. All cases address the needs of a local community, focusing on community impact, and the cases likewise are relevant and transferable. We are hoping that these cases are credible to policymakers to demonstrate a high level of community and stakeholder transferability. I mentioned previously that these are 14, but the truth is that we gathered well more than 14. And with that criteria, we were able to also identify more than 115 cases that we felt represented heritage-informed decarbonization and all of the strategies therein. So we've also included extra to the downloadable PDF, the Atlas, or the Decarbonizing the Built Environment through Heritage Atlas, that is available online at builtbuildings.org/DBTH Atlas. It includes 117 global cases integrating decarbonization and heritage strategies, but it's filterable by the 6 global regions that the work represents, as well as typology, as well as the 12 different approaches to heritage-informed decarbonization. And finally, we can get to today's cases. So today's cases we have 3 cases, as I mentioned. In our first webinar, however, I want to sort of point out that we began with the cases. We started looking at some of these about approaches to heritage-informed decarbonization from Dr. Mokolade Johnson of the Architecture and Urbanism Research Hub at the University of Lagos. And we also heard from Marinelle Nolan-Wheatley of the Preservation Resources Center in New Orleans. Today, we're going to hear about the project, the Relevancy Guidebook, or how we can transform the future of preservation. And this will be presented by Bonnie McDonald. We're also going to hear from Filippo Calcerano about the project Beacon, modeling and simulation tools to guide historic building retrofits. And finally, we'll hear from Rosie of Masons Inc., and we'll hear about heritage knowledge, women's empowerment, and low carbon buildings. I'm going to share a bit with you about the background of Bonnie, Filippo, and Rosie, and then I'll also introduce our two additional panelists who are going to have a general discussion about heritage-informed decarbonization. So let's start with Bonnie. Bonnie is a strategic urbanist and preservationist advancing building reuse as a systems level response to climate change, housing, public health, and spatial injustice. Bonnie received the James Marston Fitch Charitable Foundation's 2020 Mid-Career Fellowship to research how preservation can deliver greater social impact, resulting in the project, in the case that we're going to discuss today, the Relevancy Guidebook, How We Can Transform the Future of Preservation. This project that we'll hear about is, as Bonnie will demonstrate, shaping practice and policy conversations nationwide. Bonnie is a recent recipient of a 2027 Loeb Fellowship at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. Next, we'll hear from Filippo Calcerano, an architect, senior researcher of the Institute of Heritage Science of the National Research Council of Italy, ISPC-CNR. Filippo is an expert in energy and environmental improvement of built heritage through building and microclimate performance simulations, HBIM, and interoperability. Thanks to Filippo's international professional and academic experience, he is consolidating a particular sensitivity to interdisciplinary research and the role of knowledge gaps closer between different research fields and stakeholders in order to streamline digital workflows applied to the built environment, focusing on integrating the environmental design and conservation perspectives, leveraging the potential of IT management and decision support tools. And Rosie Paul is a co-founder and principal of Masons Inc., a practice centered on sustainability, heritage conservation, and social architecture. Rosie has represented India as a speaker and moderator at COP26, 27, and 28, championing architecture's role in climate action. Rosie advocates for gender equality and representation in the construction sector while working to embed culture in climate policy. His work is driven by a commitment to creating more inclusive and equitable building sites where culture, gender, and sustainability are woven together as core threads of practice. And our final two panelists will be discussing a community of practice. These include Nelda Ruiz. Nelda is a fronteriza community organizer, public folklorist, cultural worker, and educator from Ambos Nogales in the Sonoran borderlands. She's the co-founder and co-director of Regeneration, where she is co-leading the development of a community land trust to secure community-controlled assets and advance climate, cultural, and economic justice at Tucson's South Side. As a program manager at the Southwest Folklife Alliance, Nelda leads community development and cultural organizing initiatives that center folklife, traditional knowledge, and community-led research as tools for strengthening cultural heritage, advancing community ownership, and building equitable, resilient, and regenerative communities. And our second panelist is Kimberly Reeves. Kimberly Reeves is the executive director of the Center for Sustainability at Agnes Scott College, a historic women's liberal arts college located in Decatur, Georgia, in the US. Founded in 1889. Agnes Scott is committed to achieving carbon neutrality by 2037 and has reduced its emissions by over 52%. Kimberly leads a collaborative and engaging center to develop leaders that strengthen community, protect our natural environment, and address social challenges of our time. I am very excited to turn the speaking over to Bonnie McDonald, who will take us through our first case today, the Relevancy Guidebook.
Thank you very much, Billie. I appreciate that. I deeply appreciate that Build Buildings Lab chose the Relevancy Guidebook as a case study to really demonstrate the opportunities around preservation and its integration with these social impacts. So thank you very much to Build Buildings Lab and to the National Trust for Historic Preservation for allowing me today to talk about this imperative and the opportunity to scale our social impact in this way. Now, as Billie mentioned, my work seeks to align preservation as a strategic tool for climate mitigation and resilience, for housing access, for spatial justice, and health and well-being. Preservationists in general are really not well versed in these interdisciplinary topics, the practice of them, the pain points, and even some of the language that's involved. And because of that lack of knowledge, there has been some reticence to broadly integrate these points, climate, housing, health, spatial justice into the practice of preservation. So the Relevancy Guidebook was really meant to be an accessible tool that is providing concepts, language, resources, as well as connections that are going to lead to relevant and doable action to integrate these practices into preservation. And the project goal was really to create a tool that would inform and inspire the evolution of practices and policies in preservation that have largely been inaccessible or effective at addressing the critical issues that are facing our communities across the nation of the United States, its territories, and its tribal communities. So I want to introduce you to this tool, the Relevancy Guidebook, and then take a short focus on the topic of preservation as climate change mitigation as one of the essays within this guidebook. So the Relevancy Guidebook itself is a crowdsourced compendium of the opportunities and the challenges around the preservation field and built building reuse, at least in the context of the United States. It's intended to build a resource that makes it easier to take action for those who have very little time, and that's probably all of us right now. So it's available as a free resource that you can download at my organization, Landmarks Illinois, in alignment with our guiding principles. So our principles are for the free sharing of resources and to be fully transparent and accountable. So we're happy to provide this to people all across the world as a tool, as a resource for you. And these are just some examples that you will see in the Relevancy Guidebook or beyond in our work. So what prompted the creation of this resource was that 90% of the preservation field, at least in the United States, through 2 different surveys demonstrated that we see that change is needed in our field. And that was a survey by the National Trust for Historic Preservation and by Randy Mason at the University of Pennsylvania. In addition, having been involved with the preservation practice for the last 20 years, I'm aware that we have been continually talking about this, and that has been a criticism by people in our field, is that we often talk about the evolution of the field, but we don't necessarily feel we have the resources to do it. So what is it going to take? I think we're asking ourselves, what is it going to take to inspire action? What do people need to make that possible? And that question led to the fact that there are very few resources that really are a compendium of the opportunities, the challenges, the models that are out there, the wisdom, and even the people to contact who are doing this work. So that led me to go out and interview 130 people across the United States, again, tribal communities, U.S. territories, and even some practitioners around the world, to help to identify what those opportunities were, what those models were to bring together, and the crowdsourced wisdom and perspective of the entire field. So I want to thank everybody who participated. Again, that was 130 people. A lot of time went into that for sharing their wisdom. And so just to say that the Relevancy Guidebook is not mine. I brought it together. It's really the wisdom of the entire field, people who are working in preservation as well as outside of the field as well. So what it yielded was 8 common bite-sized essays on the opportunity areas and also the challenges within the current practice. It was really a proof of concept around these opportunity areas to connect preservation to greater social impact. At the beginning of every essay that you'll see in here, those 8 essays, there are discussion prompts that are included to invite dialogue. And when we begin to open lines of inquiry, it can often change mindsets, and those mindset shifts can lead to, different action. So what I hope is that this is going to give people the option to have discussion within their organizations or their respective fields and decide what action is doable to them. So as I mentioned, it's a consolidated resource, but it's definitely not comprehensive. It was published in 2023. And so this is also a resource that is a product of its time. So we need to continue to update resources other ways and to provide them in a convenient place. That's what we learned. I also wanted to say it was very intentional to choose the word guidebook just because people can really choose their own adventure. They can take a journey based on their capacity, their abilities, their resources, what authority they have in their own organizations. So it's meant to be used that way. And also to make change feel possible, I hope. So the opportunity around this, these are these 8 opportunity areas, is really to focus on the reuse of the built environment as as the potential for social impact, as was mentioned. And those conversations are often reduced, unfortunately, to either ors when you think about climate action. That it's either preservation and the valuing of the historic built environment, or it is climate action, when truly they are integrated. So climate impacts really ask us to tap into our humanity and our empathy, especially Filippo is here today. He's in Europe at a time when Europe is experiencing the hottest weather they have ever had, with resources that are very different than perhaps those of us in the United States as far as air conditioning, for example, and ethics around air conditioning. So, this really makes us think about our conscientiousness in being global citizens and taking action that is going to benefit everybody around the world. So that was part of this effort, was to create an essay that guided us on actions that we could take that as global citizens are going to benefit everyone. I hope you can go back and look at these when you get to the relevancy guidebook. I've got a QR code at the very end of this where you can link to the executive summary. So the preservation field really has this opportunity to position and to scale this reuse as a solution with principled compromise. Oftentimes, we are led to believe that if we integrate climate solutions into historic preservation, that we're jeopardizing its materiality, that it is historic resources, what we call its integrity, when there are multiple ways to do this. It really demands a mindset shift away from thinking about material as something that is really precious, into thinking of it as a valuable, sustainable resource. So this is a mindset shift that that in this particular essay I focus on, loving the perspective of heritage informed that Built Buildings Lab has done, because heritage, history, our story, our identity should really inform our actions, but it shouldn't prevent us from taking climate solutions that are going to benefit people all around the world. So for example, the guidebook has a specific essay, as you saw, on preservation as climate mitigation and action. And it lays out active and passive solutions. In fact, starting with some things that are really traditional uses to mitigate the heat effect or cold effect in houses. And we don't often talk about those passive solutions. So I include one here for you, awnings. Awnings were a way to, mitigate the heat effect inside of homes. We also had curtains, for example, or something as easy as just getting a little bit more uncomfortable. So there are some wonderful data-backed instances like Erica Avrami, Patrice Fry, and Carl Elefante, who are talking about energy audits as well. So I encourage you to look at this so it's not a binary choice. I'll close by just saying that the relevancy guidebook is there for you as an easy resource to navigate. At the bottom of every page is a hyperlink to take you back to the table of contents so you can easily move around to these resources. And here is the QR code that you can use to get to the executive summary. Once again, I'm tremendously thrilled to have been able to have the highlight of the relevancy guidebook in the toolkit, and I hope that you will take a look at it and connect with me to tell you your thoughts on this topic. And now I'm very pleased to turn this over to the next speaker, Filippo Calcerano, to talk about his case study. Thank you.
Hello, I hope you are seeing my screen. Okay, I'm going. So, hi everyone, I am Filippo Calcerano, senior researcher at the National Research Council of Italy, where I'm part of the Institute of Heritage Science. the Built Heritage Innovation Lab, which deals with conservation and diagnostic, digital and green transition of built heritage and knowledge management. And we're also part of the mobile laboratory of the European Research Infrastructure for Heritage Science, IRIS, providing energy and environmental analysis to the research community. And here's our lab staff. So let's start with a bit of context. We all know that built heritage plays a key role in the Sustainable Development Goal agenda and is threatened by the impacts of climate crisis, thus requiring adaptation. But mitigation is also key because from a conservation perspective, reducing management costs and the utility bills frees up resources for preventive conservation. From a climate change perspective, it contributes to reducing greenhouse gas emission, showing that historic buildings are not only victims of climate change, but also part of the solution. Moreover, adaptation and mitigation should be addressed together as they can synergize to achieve higher results in combating causes and effects of climate change. How can we do it? Well, in Italy, the scientific debate has theorized the principle of energy and environmental improvement as opposed to simple regulatory compliance as a process to improve the passive, active, and renewable energy production performance of built heritage, compatible with the principle of international restoration charters. The study of built heritage from an environmental design perspective grants disciplinary cross-fertilization, provides an added value of knowledge on the intended passive behavior of historical buildings, which can also be used on new and existing constructions. We could call it antiquity-based innovation. Intervention on symbolic public buildings are a beacon, both for raising awareness in the construction sector and for mobilizing the society. And last but not least, the complexity related with this intervention make historical buildings the most challenging experimental laboratory in which to apply advanced technologies and processes, but also an ideal place whose experts are familiar with the intersection of hard science and humanities, a technological stress test that supports the scalability of these processes. Let's get to the tools. On the one hand, we have dynamic simulation, which as a non-invasive analysis are very promising to understand complex phenomena, provide quantitative feedback on design choices, also in terms of decay. On the other, we have heritage building information modeling that allows to integrate a whole series of contributions within a federation of models concerning geometric survey, multidisciplinary analysis, simulation, asset management, and documentation. These are needed to develop a useful representation of the building over time that evolves with it during maintenance activities and that is kept ready for use every time a new intervention starts. Moreover, the interoperability between the two environments could save time while reducing the risk of errors. In these processes, it is essential that each expert is kept as much as possible in his or her disciplinary comfort zone, avoiding unfamiliar steps that reduce the scalability to the market. The idea is that an H-beam approach manages data flows while keeping them accessible and easy to use. The analysis, outlined here in 4 strands, converge in the H-beam model, which is then exported to a simulation model and calibrated using real data, serving then as a decision support tool for design solution to foster interdisciplinarity among experts and enhance the accuracy of prediction. And that's when Beacon project comes in, funded by the Italian Ministry of Research and developed with our partners, the University of Tor Vergata and of Ferrara. Beacon starts from this problem. Energy and environmental improvement interventions are complex, and this limits their application and increases the risk of maladaptation. We asked ourselves, and we are asking you also, what are the technical barriers that limit this intervention, and what can we do to fight them? And we have set ourselves the goal of contributing to consolidating and systematizing scientific knowledge on the topic and working on technology transfer. That means bridging knowledge gaps, refining the workflow, simplifying tool selection, and disseminating specialized knowledge while also supporting the training of professionals. The case study is Villa Mondragone, as you see behind me also, a palace standing on a panoramic hill overlooking Rome, on the remains of an ancient Roman villa, hosting the representative headquarters of the University of Tor Vergata. Starting from the historical architectural analysis, we have a guide for all the other analysis. The geometric survey of the building was created by integrating different technology from hand sketches to simultaneous localization and mapping SLAM for the quick acquisition of the interiors. This is the SLAM point cloud of the casino we are analyzing. We've integrated this point cloud with a drone-based photogrammetric survey that was also equipped with a thermographic sensor. Here we can see the localization of picture compared to the building, the drone point cloud, and this is the final point cloud of the part of the building we are analyzing. Archaeological works are underway in the basement, restoration works on the first floor. The intermediate floor is currently used and has typical challenges of historic buildings with erratic usage of exhibition and conference rooms, restriction on possible intervention, and small maintenance problems. For the energy and environmental analysis, we started from infrared thermographic analysis to check our initial hypothesis on the homogeneous walls of the building in order to plan further analysis for the thermophysical characterization of the envelope. It was interesting to check the overall behavior of the basement and first floor that, although not in use, they maintain a fairly high temperature due to the passive behavior of the building. Then we started with indoor environmental monitoring of some key areas in order to support the simulation calibration. This is the heat flux measurement of the envelope to define our wall stratigraphy without invasive tests. And this is the interoperability pipeline from a BIM model to two different simulation tools in which we are evaluating the potential and limitations of current workflows to develop modeling manuals that anyone can use. And this forms the backbone of the workflow guideline, which will feature a web interface designed to help professionals define their activities to be carried out based on the building complexity, data availability, and other characteristics such as the presence of system or users. The goal is to ask the right question, estimate the required effort, allocate the appropriate amount of work to each task, and ensure a process that can be scaled up and adjusted to different levels of detail in response to the specific complexity of each case study. Let's wrap up with a few words about what we're doing on the simulation side. This is the current release of the guideline, already available for free on our Institute website, that we will update by the end of Beacon project, including identification of learning outcome framework for training purposes. The same we produce for integrating renewable energy communities in historic city centers within Interreg NextMed Sharon project. We collaborate with expert groups from International Energy Agency and Building Smart, that's the organization focusing on digitalization and standardization of the construction sector. And we keep adding other bricks to culture-based climate action and advocacy, in which we have been increasingly involved over the last years to respond to the urgency of the society to be able to perform mitigation and adaptation interventions also on built heritage. And that's all. Now I'm really pleased to hand over the presentation to a colleague and friend with whom I shared many culture-based climate action initiatives. Rosie, Paul, over to you.
Hello everyone. Thank you so much, Filippo, for such a great introduction. I'm just waiting for, it's my pleasure to talk to you all about a project that's very close to my heart, a project called Cheerville. It is a project, it is a residence in Bangalore, which is the southern part of India. So this project was led by, I would say, three guiding principles. One was to inform and promote traditional knowledge, to use local low carbon materials, and to build on cultural practices. So when we look at, So what that means is that whenever we approach any project at Masons Inc., like all architects, we look at what the site can provide for us. But this additional question that we ask ourselves is, what can we provide for the site? So what I mean by that is, what can the site provide for us, in terms of views, in terms of directional sun path, in terms of what are the local resources and materials available, But also looking at, what can we do for this place and the context in terms of cultural context, in terms of, communities that exist around the site. So we not only look at low impact buildings, but we also look at our buildings creating a positive impact in and around the site. So when I talked about the guiding principles, how does that really translate? It means, looking at the communities there. So this particular project we had, it's in the outskirts of Bangalore, so it borders two states. And we had communities from neighboring villages working in and around the region. And we had women from those communities working as extra hands for as farm help, domestic labor, etc. And we saw that there was an opportunity or an ecosystem in place to actually start a training program and train these women in alternate green livelihoods. And sorry, skipping twice. And speaking about culture and how culture becomes relevant to a context like this is looking at traditional knowledge that exists, not only on the site where we are working, but also looking at what are the other knowledge systems available that we can import to the site that would work well in our site as well. So this is an example where we brought a master artisan in lime plasters from Rajasthan, which is from the west of India. We work in the south of India that has learned how to work with do durable lime plasters, traditional plasters that are water resistant and last really long. So we brought him to the site and trained these women in these plasters. And this is a way in which knowledge can exist beyond one person, and also we can continue to learn from it beyond our time as well. Looking very local, looking at existing knowledge systems in terms of, this is a picture of natural additives that were used in plasters a while ago, before there were industrial additives to make them more durable and stronger. So what you're seeing is a seed that releases tannins in water that make them more water resistant. On the right, you have unrefined sugar that was used very often and mixed with earth and also lime to make them more durable. So looking back at that and seeing how we can bring it back. And also this project, we tried to build it without any cement. So it's a cement-free construction, which automatically led us to looking at solutions before, the industrial era. Then, of course, passive design that helps us, optimize on the operational energy required for thermal comfort. And in effect, what you end up with is a home that is very rooted in where it comes from, not only in the materials, but also the people who build it, the hands that touch it, like whatever we work with. And it's also a self-sustaining model where the house is completely off-grid. It harvests the rainwater. It recycles the gray water and is a system that would also last in apocalypse. And I think nowadays how we also inform clients is with all these disruptions due to the geopolitical situation. It's always wonderful to have a home that will survive even if everything that we're used to stops working. I'll run through this quickly, just some illustrations that show how natural and the materials that we use. So very simple ones, which is of earth, earth, bamboo, stone, and a lot of recycled or upcycled materials. So, we looked at bamboo. These are just some lime finishes that were used, and the use of earth, but in different ways. It was also used as a way to skill these women, and see how they can learn from these skilling sessions to use it and incorporate it to improve or build their own homes. And as we were working with communities, there were a lot of things that were done outside of the construction, not only looking at the construction site and the stages of construction, but also looking at how the women can be engaged, and we spend more time with them and have some learning activities with them where we are skilling them and talking to them in ways in which we can understand and break some language barriers or social barriers that are created within us. We introduced a nutrition program so that we can tackle malnutrition in these communities. And these were the activities we were talking about, where you let go of your pen and paper, which you're so used to, and work on the ground, work with things that they are comfortable with. So we learn to communicate better and teach them and inform them why it's good to live in the way, in the materials that in the homes that they live in, the use of natural materials and the importance of continuing to live in them, and the importance of living inside healthy buildings. This is just the team. So we had an all-women's team on site working, not only the women, but also the client, the site architect, and us. We were a living. This was a women-led project. And of course, I think everyone speaks about outreach. All the speakers before me have spoken about outreach. And now that the project is over, we're seeing ways in which we can tell people about, these principles we use. They are simple principles that can be adopted. The book covers various things on the activities we did with the women, the learnings from the techniques we did, very low-tech techniques, some of them which we experimented on site itself. And then we've also curated an exhibition around this project, more focusing on how important it is to train women so they can become agents of change rather than victims of climate change. And something we also have been working on is a board game inspired from this project, which can easily translate these complex terminologies of sustainability into just a simple game which talks about carbon credits and interesting ways in which you can build easily and also maintain your positive impact on the environment. So I end my presentation, and thank you so much for this opportunity. And there are all of these coordinates if you want to reach out or just know more about the kind of work we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie, Filippo, and Rosie for sharing those amazing cases. I want to invite now Kimberly and Nelda to join. We're going to have this discussion about practicing heritage-informed decarbonization that we saw so clearly demonstrated in those three cases. I also want to sort of point out, Nelda and Kimberly, the other important role that you had in this project. You were part of our North American advisory group from the very beginning of Decarbonizing the Built Environment through Heritage, and you generously contributed your time, your knowledge, your insight, your guidance as we hit every milestone along the way. And one of the very important things about your participation that we learned from was your willingness to share with us how your communities engage climate action and heritage together. So I was hoping you might share that with the audience today. And Kimberly, I wanted to start with you. Could you introduce us to your community and your community's engagement of climate action and heritage?
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and introduce you all to the community at Agnes Scott College. We are a women's liberal arts institution located in the southeastern part of the United States, specifically Decatur, Georgia, which is right outside Atlanta. We have been around for 137 years and were founded for people marginalized by their gender to gain a quality education and continue to strive towards that mission, supporting students who experience barriers to educational opportunities. Maybe a little snapshot of our present day community. We have about 1,000 students, both undergraduate and graduate. For the past 2 decades, our student population has had no ethnic majority, with about 60% of our students identifying as a person of color. About a quarter of our students are first generation, and about 40% are Pell eligible. Our mission, which I think it really ties into the work of climate action and justice that we do, is to educate women of every identity to think deeply, live honorably, and engage the intellectual and social challenges of our time. And so I know you all heard earlier that we have reduced our emissions by 52% and have a carbon neutrality goal of 2037. And really, this stems from that culture of care that comes from generations of alums and women supporting each other, and really couldn't do it without both the leadership support, but also the grassroots support of this. And happy to share a little bit more details about that, but would love for Nelda to introduce her community.
Thanks. Thanks, Kimberly. It's an honor to be here with you all. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I'm sorry, Billie, did you want us to do an introduction of our community, or did you want us to start the first question?
Yeah, if you could tell us about your community's engagement with climate action and heritage.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the Southwest Folklife Alliance, we partner with communities to strengthen neighborhoods through cultural heritage, community development, and cultural organizing, recognizing that the knowledge communities already hold is very valuable and essential to building more resilient futures. On Tucson's historic South Side, which is where I'm based here in Arizona, climate action and heritage have always been deeply intertwined and connected. I'm sorry, my hair keeps going invisible. Our work begins by recognizing that communities already hold generations of knowledge about caring of place through traditions, foodways, vernacular architecture, relationships, and collective stewardship. Rather than asking communities to participate in climate solutions that are designed elsewhere, we begin by listening to the knowledge that already exists and creating opportunities for residents to shape the future of their own neighborhoods. We found that heritage isn't simply about preserving the past, it's about organizing people to shape the future. And that approach has led us from documenting neighborhood foodways to organizing around housing, community ownership, and the adaptive reuse of Louis Market, a historic former Chinese neighborhood market that today serves as a Louis Market Center for Cultural Organizing. For us, heritage isn't the destination, but it's the starting point for community organizing and movement building.
Thanks, Nelda and Kimberly. Kimberly, I want to follow up next with you about the work that's happening at specific work and strategies that you're using at Agnes Scott College. What does your community's practice of heritage inform decarbonization look like on a day-by-day basis?
Yeah, absolutely. So pointing back to that success of the 52% emissions reduction that we've seen, we can definitely point to energy efficiency and water conservation as one of our top priorities. One of the solutions that we've been able to implement, especially as an institution of our size, is our Green Revolving Fund. So 100% donor funded fund that allows us to put money towards these energy efficiency and water conservation. So really points towards caring for our existing building stock. thinking about, I know I mentioned engagement and support of our community, both from the president and her cabinet, along with our entire campus community. We couldn't do this without all of our partners across divisions, across departments, but also within our broader community. And then I think probably one of the biggest things that maybe this audience would be interested in is thinking about that culture of care. Our former president signed on to the American College and Universities President's Climate Commitment in 2007, and that's really where this focus of climate action and justice started. And so since 2009, the college has not had new construction, which is pretty rare for higher education institutions. And so since 2009, we've had 5 full building historic renovations. Combined roughly 200,000 square feet worth of space, and our built buildings on campus is a little over 1 million square feet of space. And so really thinking about the intent and the care behind reuse of buildings, but also how those renovations were funded was by significant number of alums, of course, community foundations and other supporters, but our alums found their voice on this campus and were encouraged and supported. And I think that that's very much telling of a pay it forward kind of model of wanting to ensure that future generations of students have the same, if not better, opportunities. And if they made friends of living on the second floor of Main Hall, which is right behind me, they're hoping that others have that same opportunity. And definitely reference the toolkit. I know that Billie talked about at the beginning of this webinar. You'll find a little bit more information, but we were able to utilize the CARE tool for an entire look at our campus to show that the building reuse strategy helped us avoid significant amount of carbon emissions that would have really impacted our success of being able to reach this 2037 carbon neutrality goal. So we're grateful for all these very different creative financing structures and community support and being able to tell the story of who our community is to make this all happen.
Oh, thank you, Kimberly. Nelda, I want to pick up on a comment that you made about heritage as a pathway. And beyond reducing carbon emissions, what transformations have you seen when culture leads climate action and community development?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest lessons from our work is that the most meaningful transformations aren't always environmental, they're social. When culture leads community development, we've seen neighbors become leaders, become organizers, elders become teachers, young people become leaders, and historic places become spaces for collective action rather than simply preservation. We've also seen stronger relationships, deeper trust, greater community ownership, and a renewed sense of belonging. Those outcomes may not always be measured in carbon emissions, but they're exactly what's needed to make climate action possible, because resilient communities are built on relationships, shared trust, and shared stewardships. And communities protect what they feel connected to. Culture creates that connection, and that connection is what sustains climate action over generations.
Thank you, Nelda. I know that we're very close to the end of our time. We have 1 minute left. I don't know if we're able, Jim, are we able to take a couple of more minutes, or do we need to close this webinar out today?
Billie, you can take a couple more minutes.
Oh, thank you. So generous. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so then I want to swing over maybe to Kimberly. One of the things that's really clear is that in all of this work that we're talking about today, all of the cases, the work that you've shared, there are often barriers that we face that we have to overcome, especially when we're aspiring to maybe change a system. So I'm curious, could you share briefly with maybe some of the barriers that you had to overcome at Agnes Scott College, and if there's maybe 1 or 2 solutions that you implemented in your work?
Absolutely. And I referenced it a little bit with the Green Revolving Fund, but maybe I can speak to that a little bit more. In 2011, we signed on to the $1 billion Green Challenge to fundraise $1 million to create this fund that was specifically for energy efficiency and water conservation retrofits. And so in 2014, we were successful in that 100% donor-funded fundraising efforts, and since then have done over 18 different projects that from geothermal to two different historic renovations in 2014 and 2018, to all of our toilets across campus have been replaced with low flow water features, and so really thinking about being good stewards of our campus, and especially in things that maybe are a little bit more challenging to fundraise for, knowing that this is under the umbrella of that effort of trying to achieve carbon neutrality, and knowing that these initiatives are so important. I think that might be one of the biggest solutions that we found as very successful, and not necessarily a barrier, but thinking about capacity building, and our role as educators and mentors. You can point to every project and program through the history of our Center for Sustainability, and point directly back to students doing this work. So whether it's been research, whether it's been advocacy, whether it's been project management, whether it's been attending meetings so that they learn and gain connections within different industries. Really, our role is fostering that next generation. So I think very much important for all that we do here.
Thank you, Kevin. The final question, Nelda. You pointed out, and this is actually how the project began. We started with trying to understand the relationship between heritage and decarbonization, understanding that there's a really important relationship between the two. But as you demonstrated to us with your work, it goes beyond that. That there's actually a range of co-benefits that we can begin to understand when we look through this lens of heritage and decarbonization. So I'm curious, could you speak a little more about, in our final remarks, how cultural heritage has become a tool for organizing, not just preservation, in your work?
Yeah, thank you, Billie. We think of heritage as something we practice and not simply something that we preserve. Years ago, when we began documenting foodways and the food traditions that exist in our community, we wanted to honor what already existed. What surprised us was that those conversations quickly became conversations about housing affordability, about gentrification, about public space, and who gets to shape the future of our communities. Today, those same relationships that started 10 years ago, literally 10 years ago, are the same relationships that are helping build a community land trust to steward the Louise Market for Center for Cultural Organizing, literally trying to build a new system, a circular economy, a solidarity economy. And for us, heritage became the way communities organize for stewardship, shared ownership, collective decision-making, and a more resilient future.
Thank you, Nelda. And thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, Bonnie, Filippo, and Rosie for sharing all of your work with us. Jim, it's time to close this out.
Sure. Thanks, Billie. And wow, thank you to all the speakers. I think we learned so much, so many great insights there. Scratching the surface, and I know we didn't have the time for questions like we hoped, but I'll say that as we look ahead, we have another webinar coming up in August on this work. And actually, we're extending the time for that session to 90 minutes. So we'll try to make sure we leave a little more time for some discussion and questions from the audience. But appreciate everybody joining us today. We do have a couple of other webinars coming up, one on federal policy and another on mapping. Those are actually next week. And then again, please sign up and tune in August for the third part of the series here on the heritage-informed decarbonization policies. All right. Well, with that, again, thanks to everybody. Appreciate your sharing your knowledge. The webinar is recorded and will be shared directly with everybody who signed up, and it's available along with all of our other webinars on our forum, savingplaces.org library. All right, everybody, have a good rest of the week. Thank you.